Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me for it. And thank you especially to the people who help make this possible for you every single day with their support at patreon.com/SW7x7. So we're in the penultimate episode of a series that is, a little bit different from what our general episodes are like. I've been reflecting on 10 years of Star Wars podcasting. That anniversary is coming up on July 7th, and sharing things that I've learned under different categories. This is definitely a different type of podcast where I'm not stopping and starting on different takes and whatnot. I'm just letting it fly. And so this is the 6th of 7 episodes, and I'm talking about the idea of expansion in Star Wars storytelling. So there was a time when we had this incredible expanded universe of storytelling across books and comics and role-playing games and video games and all this stuff. And then, of course, in April of 2014, Lucasfilm rebooted the canon and said, all right, the only things that are official now are the 6 movies that had come out at that time. I guess the 7 movies when you count the Clone Wars movie, and all of the Clone Wars cartoons that had come out to that point. And that's it. And so then, it was about, 6 months later or so that the first novel, A New Dawn by John Jackson Miller, came out, and Star Wars Rebels debuted that fall in 2014. And of course, they were working on The Force Awakens at that time. So, there was a contraction similar to, what things looked like in 1983, 4, 5, right? Where there was just a couple of movies and a couple of TV cartoons, and that was it. And then in the 90s, that's when things went crazy with the expanded universe. I keep forgetting, referencing the comics, but the comics were still in play in 1985, 1986, something like that, right? There was only 3 or 4 years where there wasn't any active Star Wars storytelling happening before they started the expanded universe, and that was the the thing that launched 1,000 ships, right? Because of all the dozens of novels and hundreds of comics and so much storytelling that happened, and then suddenly all wiped away. Like Obi-Wan talking about Alderaan, millions of voices crying in terror and suddenly silenced, right? That was basically every expanded universe story. And now here we are again. Now here we are with dozens of novels and hundreds of comics, and they have, over the course of 10 years, greatly expanded the universe of Star Wars storytelling once again. And they have done what they did previously, in that when they started the expanded universe, they were focused on that era of time right after the events of Return of the Jedi, right? So it was just 5 years after the events of Return of the Jedi that the Thrawn trilogy took place, and they stayed pretty much along that timeline, but eventually they started going the other way. They started going backwards. And yes, the prequel era stuff was, roped off so that way creators couldn't go after it, but they went back even further, tens of thousands of years to the dawn of the Jedi. And it took a while, but Star Wars is finally doing that in its current storytelling now, right? So the High Republic, the Project Luminous initiative, going back hundreds of years prior to the events of the Phantom Menace, now they are finally exploring that and creating a whole new space for Star Wars storytelling. And they're talking about doing it again with James Mangold's Dawn of the Jedi movie that's supposed to take place at the very birth of the Jedi, which would be 25,000 years prior to the events of the movie. So, we are finally at the era of true expansion. So there is, the idea of expansion in terms of the different types of storytelling, the different, media of storytelling. And then there's the actual canon timeline. And the canon timeline had been pretty compressed for quite a while. And now we're finally getting it expanded again. And it's actually making Star Wars feel fresh again in its way. And the fact that the High Republic has done so well that it inspired Lucasfilm to say, yeah, we need to take the leap and not just do this in books and comics and have little things, spliced into our virtual reality things, or to have, part of a storyline in the Jedi video games inspired by High Republic stuff. Like, no, let's make a commitment to, the next level up, which is live action, right? I mean, that'll tell you just how successful the High Republic has been for, anyone that, you've heard saying, oh, the High Republic is a failure, or this, that, or the other, like somebody who just wants to, hate on the High Republic. And probably it's not that they're hating on the High Republic, and it's not that they're hating on Star Wars. It's that Star Wars is evolving with the times, and perhaps those folks are not necessarily evolving with it. It's okay if you have genuine criticisms about the High Republic. If you think there are things that can be done to improve it, that's fine. But if you're thinking that it's bad because it's representative of a certain place and time in our lives, well then, yeah, that's a whole different conversation entirely. But this expansion has been really thrilling to see over the course of the last few years, and the fact that they're actually slowing down a little bit with the High Republic. Like, they talked about it at Star Wars Celebration last year, how the pace of their release of the novels and the comics was such that they were just trying to get people on board with the idea. And now with Phase 3, they've spaced things out. So, the waves are coming out in, much, longer intervals apart from each other, which gives you more time to be able to absorb and, dive into these stories. So far, I have not checked out the Phase 3 High Republic stuff, but it does seem like it's taking place about 100 years before the events of the Acolyte, so I'm not sure how much of it is actually going to bear. Probably a couple of, things that might be interesting to, enhance the viewership, but not necessarily anything that, would take away from your viewing because you didn't necessarily know it. So, yeah, I'm grateful that, it took a while over the course of the 10 years, and we did kind of stay within safe spaces in the canon timeline, but here we are finally getting out beyond our comfort zone and telling new stories in different places and having the opportunities to, explore different ideas as a result of that. So yeah, another reason why it's been really awesome to see the way Star Wars has evolved over the past 10 years. So that's what I've got for you on the idea of expansion as I've been thinking about this last decade. And that is going to do it for this episode of the podcast. If you enjoy the show, I hope you will consider helping me get the word out about it. It's just telling other people whether online or in person or via algorithms and whatnot. And you can even help me keep producing this daily dose of Star Wars joy. And you can learn more about that at patreon.com/SW7X7. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode as always. And may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.